This is the Westside King's Church podcast, where we aim to encounter and embody the surprising grace of Jesus.
Well, it's good to be back with Bob for a bit of a midweek deep dive. Bob, you've joined us for the first of the three-part Ghost series. That's obviously available on the podcast, the episode before this one. But we wanted to get back into this habit of taking a little pause and reflecting on the sermon that has gone past before we can look ahead to this coming weekend. But first, Bob, I think I say this on behalf of everybody at Westside, but welcome back. It's been great to have you this Sunday, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today as well.
Well, thank you for, the warm welcome back, and it was just really nice to be with the people and lots of wonderful words and exchanges on Sunday. So it was wonderful for me too.
Yeah, no, I think it was a beautiful moment, and I think everybody's excited to hear the sort of chance to sort of unpack your idea over the 3 weeks, which I'm hoping it was really enjoyable for you as well, Bob, as opposed to trying to cram all the ideas into, I've only got one Sunday, but to really spend time and marinate in an idea.
As I've often said, David, and you'll probably understand this, like I live my life as a pastor. I was never the special guest speaker. You know what I mean? There's sort of a talent for that, come in and tell and sort of wow, the place. That was never me. So I appreciate the chance to sort of like go the slow burn here and take time. Yes. And I hope that there really is a meaningful arc to what we do over these weeks.
And I think listening in, and I have a few things that I'd love to get a chance to explore with you today, but listening in at the doors that you opened, even in my own life personally, that I was like, I'm looking forward to just thinking about that a little bit more. But Bob, here's where I'd love to start with you, and this is from one preacher to another, is that every sermon that appears on a Sunday morning has gone through, or at least we always hope has gone through. There are those stressed weekends, aren't there? But a sermon has always gone through an editing process. It's gone through you are a great researcher and reader, so I think you're probably like me, that if every sermon was twice as long, we would get in the things that we were trying to say. So one of the sort of traditions we've had when we've done a midweek podcast is to begin with, hey, Bob, what did you not say that you wish you'd had time to say? And we love that as a sort of open-ending question to give you space to sort of explore a little bit of where you might have gone but felt you didn't have time, or maybe an idea that you just wished you'd unpacked a little bit more.
Well, and that's always the case. Editing is the whole art of communication. I mean, just that big idea of in the art of communicating, sometimes you have many sub points and little points, but there's one big point, and I try to keep saying it. Pay attention. Look, see, which comes out of the Hebrew prophets, as I said, and you know this well as a biblical theologian, David, and then moves right into the way of Jesus. And it really is in some sense a unifying theme through Scripture that, I have one book on my shelf by Gregory Beale. I don't know if you know him. And I think it's called, I was just looking at it. We Become What We Worship, it's called. But he deals with this thing called sensory organ malfunction, which is kind of a fancy term. But, this repeating phrase over and over again, they have eyes to see but can't see, ears to hear but can't hear. And so, in terms of all of our sensing as a way of knowing, human knowing is really a very large topic. How do we know anything? But we start with the God-given abilities that we have to sense the world, to hear, to see. And that seems to be broken in human persons. Probably goes right back to the garden, Genesis 3, where there's some kind of split that happens in the human being between what they know and what they see, and then all that tumbles down after that. And that's a really large topic that I felt like on Sunday, all you can do is just sort of point to it, but you move past it. But it's really huge because, you think of a text like where Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." I mean, there's something about seeing or knowing that's past, goes way deeper than our faculties to apprehend in terms of our brain power. There's something very large here. And why do I miss what I miss? And why do I, one story I could have told, when I bought my car that I have now, it's 2012 Murano. So I've had it for now going on 11 years. And I remember when I was looking for cars, and then I came, oh, this might work. And you know what happened? Once I started to see that car everywhere on the road, right? I started to see Muranos everywhere. Hey, there's a Murano, there's a Murano. And it's almost like my eyes had been open to something that I'd actually never noticed Muranos before. Yeah. And so I'm just fascinated with the whole idea of knowing. You can go in philosophically, but it's really a spiritual issue. And so I mentioned on Sunday the brain situation with how we're getting habituated or distracted. But it really goes down to how can we hold ourselves in this life that we live in a meaningful stance of seeing what we ought to see, hearing what we ought to hear, and being fully alive, because this is the point of life, I think. So I could have gone there a little bit more, I suppose, but I think, you only have limited time and you try to make the big point. So, but I find that fascinating, and you can talk to me more about that. But, even the healing stories in the Gospels of healing of the blind man, they're not simply this poor man he needs to see, but they function in a symbolic way to say something to all of us, don't they? Yeah.
I was thinking actually as you were teaching on Sunday about that scene where there's a woman appears in the synagogue while Jesus is teaching, and she's got the Bible's a little vague, but something that's affecting her ability to stand up properly. And there's that beautiful moment where Jesus stops and asks for attention. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about the teacher that said, "Look at me, lift up your face." It's worth a Google if, and I'm about to ruin it for everybody, but you can go Google it and then show it to somebody else. But there's a brilliant video out there on the internet called the Selective Attention Test. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's essentially a circle of people, and they're all dressed in black or white, and they're bouncing a basketball between each other.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yes. And they ask you, they say, hey, count how many times they bounce the basketball. So everybody's paying attention, they're counting. And then it gets to the end, and it's like, how many times? And everybody guesses how many times. And then it says, did anybody see the gorilla? And everybody's like, what, a gorilla? And then when they watch it back, there's this, and you wouldn't believe it, until you see it. There's this man in a gorilla suit, walks into the middle of the screen, waves at you, and walks past. But you're so focused on, watching the bouncing of the ball, but you almost wouldn't, I think the point is you almost wouldn't believe that you could miss that. You're like, no, I'm paying attention. Yeah. So I felt this sense when you were talking about this big idea of paying attention was always also, it's the type of attention that you're paying, isn't it? It's what are you paying attention to? Yeah.
And that's why, this idea of how our eyes might be open in the story of Ignatius, I did that little piece, which I just love that phrase. His eyes were open a little. It's just so pregnant, so now starts his journey because he holds them open. But paying attention then is there's already things in our life that have happened, or how God has presenced himself with us, that we can go back to and see in a new way, because there's more there to see. So that paying attention is not simply moving forward with eyes wide open, but also casting our attention backward to say, what do I already know? What has God already shown about himself? Through scripture, through the Christian story, but also to me personally, and in unique graces or provisions, or what do I know that can hold my attention now as I walk through this moment? And I think that's important. It goes forward and backward.
And so I almost want to ask you, if you don't mind me interrupting at this point, to say, is that I'm thinking about this in terms of your work now as a spiritual director, because, without sharing the privacy of this, when I meet my spiritual director, I'm always amazed at how they seem to be able to lead me towards thinking through stories of my own past and seeing them differently. So I'm looking and I'm realizing, oh, my goodness, I hadn't realized that fits into my story in a way I hadn't seen before. So as you were explaining that just then, I found myself thinking, oh, this is what my spiritual director does with me. So maybe you've given the secret away. I'm not sure. but is that an intentional part of the sort of role of spiritual direction, do you think?
Yeah. So I said this when I started in spiritual direction for myself about 12 or 13 years ago, that even though I lived with myself, I'm very close with myself. I don't know myself by myself. It's somebody has to help me access my story. Yeah. And, it's really quite a thing. So, just as Jesus asked questions, this is the art of spiritual direction, the curiosity. It's not that the spiritual director knows anything. They just, as they're listening and paying attention to that story, they might say, well, tell me more about that. And it helps the person actually access their own journey, because for some reason, just as our eyes we can't see and we can't hear, we can't see and hear our own selves very well. Somehow we're not accessed to ourselves. And this is in keeping. I know this series has been about mental health over the past, several years. It's the same art of what a counselor will do with different tools and different purposes, but it is the talking cure. It is the talk out what's going on inside you. Yeah. So there's that paying attention backward as well as forward.
And I like that aspect of what you're framing and shaping for us, this sense that there's, you called it the talking cure just there, but there's, there's a lot of work going on of realizing that one of the best ways to take care of your mental health is actually regular therapy. Whereas we have a tendency to think, oh, I only go to therapy when things are bad, rather than, oh, what does it look like to look forward with this way? And I wonder if we've not sometimes got ourselves into similar problems within our spiritual lives, that we only really pay much attention to them. You used this phrase, I wrote it down because it struck me as poignant. We don't often pay attention until something crashes into our world. Mm-hmm. And that really, that's kind of what I'm trying to resonate back to you, I suppose, at the moment, is that, at some level, maybe there's a why question from me in here, Bob, as to why do you think that is? But then also a different question of, how do we care for the sort of things you're talking about there, the paying attention, and not making it be a pay attention that only happens when things are going badly, but to live with that as a mode of life almost. I think that's what you were sort of pushing us towards, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we just know these things. I suppose we can know them out of books, but we don't really know them out of books. We know them out of up close and personal experience, because that's the greatest teacher. And so I know that in my own life. And I think it's the universal that we all do. And I don't think it's necessarily that there has to be something, what would you say, in a negative or painful sense, but it's something about disruption, I think, or breaking out of some kind of normalcy that helps us focus. So this is, I think, in a very real way, the practical utility of stopping and rest and Sabbath and all the rest is just, we have to stop and collect ourselves. Where the things seem to get really out of control is when we haven't had that sort of gathering of self. And whether it's a spiritual practice like spiritual direction or retreat or whatever it is in our daily rhythms and whatever it is, I think it's the stopping. One thing I've always been intrigued with is in the story of Scripture, we have everything is story, and then we have this large gap in Egypt, in Israel's captivity in Egypt, where there's no storytelling for 430 years. Because they've just got their head down working for 430 years. So if there's no stopping and resting and celebrating and pausing, If there's no disruption, there's no meaning. There's no gathering up of meaning. And I could talk about that a long time, but I think why there's something crashing into our life changes us is because there's a forced disruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, Bob, there's somebody in their car right now, driving, listening to this, and they're shouting at me, going like, "Ask him to talk more about that for a long time." So I feel like it's my job to say, because, like, well, what a statement! The way you phrased that there, that nobody told stories because there was no stopping. And of course, the fascinating thing, the first thing they do when they arrive in the desert is the Lord says to them, "Observe a Sabbath," and all the stories start again.
The stories start up again.
Yeah. Wow.
It's the rhythm. So I actually believe it's altered time that is in altered space. As I told my story about that drive, and I have this memory, and I'm finding myself relocated in my story. It's because I'd stepped out of my normal space and time, and I'm ripe for paying attention to something that I have to pay attention to. And so those are the practices, the spiritual, as I said, I think I said it, but maybe I need to say it again. Our spiritual practices really are about helping us pay attention to the God who is there in the life that we're living. And to do that well, you have to stop and rest and recover. And I mean, this is the great gift. I mean, God brings his people out of bondage and says, "I command that you take a day off." That's the kind of God we have,
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting for me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like, for me in the spiritual practices, what I'm learning, I think, coming from a very much a free church tradition where we sort of said, wow, pray whenever you want because God is always listening, which is a beautiful truth.
Sure.
You can pray whenever you want and God is always listening. But it's amazing how what that actually translates to in real life is never praying, right? Because, when you can pray whenever you want, you're not organized in it. And we would, in my younger days, look at the more liturgical and organized traditions as staid and boring. But actually what I'm learning as I get older is, if you decide to commit, for example, to pray the hours, let's do morning prayer, let's do midday prayer, let's do evening prayer and nighttime prayer, you pray more. And therefore your relationship with God is more vibrant. And so I'm curious your thoughts on the rhythms and routines of these practices. So, like another example I might use, a place that is dear to both you and me. I've found that I go on occasion to Mount St. Francis, just north of Calgary, this retreat center. And because the only thing I ever really go to do there is either run Lent retreat, at Westside, or to take some time away to pray, I have now found that the moment I walk through the door there, I want to pray. And it feels easier to pray, almost as if because I've cordoned off that space. And I'm curious your thoughts on that sort of thing, of actually the wisdom of it's not just being, here's some things, but actually sometimes the routine and the rhythm of the things is what protects you and helps you pay attention. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. Well, I'll come at it in an oblique way because there's so much to talk about spiritual practice. But the way that I think of it, and this is a good Canadian illustration, is, and I'm not a hockey player, but hockey is our thing. We play hockey within a defined limit on, the boards define the hockey game. But you can play hockey on a lake in the wintertime when it's wide open expanse, and it's just a frozen lake. Well, guess what? That game doesn't go very well because the guy can skate off a mile that way and you can chase him and he can come way around and the whole game breaks down when there's not boundaries and limits and focus. So the truth is that we pay best attention and we do our best creative work and attentive work when there are boundaries on that. That's the way all art and music and poetry and everything else, to paint a picture is to frame it and say, look at within this frame. And so I think if we understand that there is an invitation to freedom, but in our human limitations, we need focuses and practices that focus us in. Just do this for 5 minutes. As I talked about the prayer of examine on Sunday, just do that 5 minutes at the end of the day. Don't make that a laborious thing. Don't make it long. Don't get all bent out of shape on it. Just invite the Spirit to be with you just for 5 minutes. and give it away to the Lord before you go to sleep. So I think it's framing things or putting them within boundaries that is really helpful to spiritual practice.
My New Testament professor used to talk about, and I've read it, he's written it in places now as well, about how there's this idea of freedom. And freedom, so he used the example, you watch a concert pianist or a jazz pianist might even be better. And, I'm not a piano player. I don't think you are, Bob, as I recall.
No.
You don't play. So you and me would go and watch a jazz concert player and we would say, this is amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And we might even say things like, it looks like he's just doing whatever he wants, right? And it just, those hands are just flying around the piano and they're just doing, whatever, and whatever comes into his mind. But my professor used to say, but there's a story that got us here. And that story was learning, oh no, you can't press that key and then that key, right? And you need to learn these scales, right? And you have to learn this very rigid music and you have to learn to play these. And once he spent a lifetime of working with these, to use your word, which I think is appropriate, boundaries.
Right.
Our response is to watch that and say, how free.
Yeah. And so we look at a painting, say, within the frame, and we say, look at that beautiful expression that captured that thought, that beautiful. Yeah. And so artistic expression is not unbounded, neither is prayer or spiritual practice. It comes to us in a form, and it invites us, adopt this form, adopt this way of being.
Yeah. I love that, Bob. I love that. I wanted to ask you about you at a point in your sermon. In my notes, it's about halfway through, but that might not be accurate. About halfway through, you turned us to Jeremiah chapter 6, and this is just gorgeous. And I wonder if this is an appropriate point for me to ask this question. I was struck again as I listened to you. You were talking about Ignatius, and you came on to talk about Ignatius, but I had a cheat. I knew that was coming. And so I had an unfair advantage. But then there's this phrase, stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths where the good way is and walk in it and find rest for your souls. And a couple of things struck me. One, the biblical scholar in me, which is always there, was struck that all the verbs are imperatives. Stand, look, ask, walk, find. I thought there's something there. But then I was drawn to this notion of you have a choice, Jeremiah. Choose the ancient one. And I thought, I know that there's something resonating in Bob there. But I felt real that connection of, let's pray the prayer of examine. This is not new. But actually there's something that we need to learn from these old traditions. So I wondered if you felt like you wanted to unpack that more or take it somewhere else. But I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's part of my own spiritual pilgrimage through the years, growing up in more of a free church, whatever I would describe my upbringing was. But certainly we didn't think about the ancient ways. Our language was always about what God was doing in the new thing he was doing.
Yes.
Always the new thing. But I think one way we can think of ancient is well tested, proven, right? So, I go to all those illustrations of history that's, the great boast was made about something, but it didn't have enough time. And we can see all kinds of illustrations of that, And what I think about these spiritual practices that they've been passed on, and this is what I believe in tradition, rightly understood. Traditionalism is different than living tradition. But living tradition is, take this very precious, proven way of being or understanding that has been proven, that is deeply embedded in our humanity and has been proved through all the various eras of history and is proven well to serve us well. So that's the ancient way in terms of learning from our fathers and mothers. And I don't think we do well when we cut ourselves off from our fathers and mothers in the faith.
No.
They've learned something. They probably didn't know. They wouldn't have understood our technological world, but they knew what it lived to live, to live a human world and a spiritual life. And so I'm always attracted to the ancient. actually. And I think maybe it's because growing up in the times that I did in the form of faith that I did, where I saw some things coming and going. And I started traveling the opposite way. Instead of out onto the new leaf on the new twig that's growing out of the tree to some new thing, I started heading back toward the bigger branches, heading for the trunk, as it were. That's the way I describe it. So I love the ancient.
It's a funny, I think, modernist shift, actually, isn't it? I always think about this when I read the Gospels, how people's concern about Jesus is that it sounds new. It's like, no, I don't want something brand new. I want something that's rooted in the story. And it's interesting that Jesus' defense is so often, this is not new.
Yeah.
Jesus' defense is, oh no, I'm just clarifying what was always true. I'm just coming to reveal it to you in a clearer way. But Jesus doesn't ever say, yes, no, you're absolutely right. This is brand new, and we're now scrapping everything that's come before us. It's a very interesting modern assumption that we are getting better, and if we keep trying very hard, it will get better still, despite, I would say, the evidence to the contrary.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I do think that's really the way of faith, is to tie into the enduring, right? And to have a little bit of suspicion about the brand new. It's not that new isn't good, because new can be beautifully good. But what the new is newly refreshed, or, what we say, newly realized, but not different from the whole, gestation of things.
Yes.
It is simply a part of the human experience that's coming into being. This is our human lives. Our human lives are not radically different from the past.
Yeah.
They have unique challenges, perhaps, but they're still very genuinely human lives, just like has been lived from the past. So therefore, we can learn from the ancient ways.
Yeah.
And that's why if we read some of the ancients, we'll find, tremendous insights given to us, because they actually can speak to our humanity away from the clutter of contemporary issues. Yeah.
You're making me think of, and I'm sure you'll don't need much introduction to this, but you're making me think of Eugene Peterson's book with that beautiful phrase, "The long obedience in the same direction," which then that book opens you up into these psalms of ascent, this psalms of we are going somewhere and we're telling ourselves the story as we're moving forward. Can you feel it? I mean, is that an intentional resonance that I'm detecting there in that sort of idea and concept?
Oh, sure. I mean, I guess I cut my teeth on the Eugene Peterson School of Ministry, but I remember him saying one time in an introduction, because I think this is what he did. He combined old and new. But he said in an introduction to a book one time, he said, I've most of what I'm saying in this book I've said somewhere else. He said, but I hope these thoughts will be freshly phrased. That's what he said. And I think that's the gist of it. Is this is not entirely different from what has come in the past, human experience, life with God. But they can be freshly phrased. We can put them in the language that communicates now, and we can discover in new ways, the ancient things. And that's the exciting part, right? So I do think Peterson was one of those voices that seemed to get us away from the faddish, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The faddish, which is only here and gone tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's what I was finding this resonance in the way that you were teaching on Sunday about this Jeremiah chapter 6 passage about it's the follow, stand at the crossroads, look, ask for the ancient paths. But then the ancient paths get unpacked as where the good way is.
Isn't that
and
something?
that walking in them is rest for your souls. So it's not just choose old over new. It's that there's a logic to tracking these paths, which is, I mean, as you read it, I think I felt myself kind of just settle a little bit.
It's just an amazing passage to actually sit with for a long time. It's one of those passages you could live with for a long time and just reflect deeply on it, chew on it. I have those passages. You have those passages. I think this is one of them. And we could suggest to the listeners, hold this before you, write it out, put it on a card on your fridge or on your dashboard of your car. Just live with this for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we pray together as the church staff. We stop every day at around about midday, and we pray a short sort of time of prayer together. And I we follow a kind of track of readings, but we broke from it today, and went back to Jeremiah 6 verse 16 and said, let's just read this a few times and just let it hang in the air for us at the moment, because it feels like exactly as you say, there's certain texts that they've just got weight and deserve time, don't they? There's
really a program in that text. There's really a pathway. Stand, look, ask, walk, as you mentioned before, and the promise of rest. And the end is a bite at the end of it, because it says, "But you said we will not do this."
Yes.
Which gets to the heart of it, because our problems really are not so much, "Oops, I made a mistake," but they're willful issues.
Yes.
Will we do this? Follow this way of being? To stop, to look, to pay attention, to ask for help. Will we do that? So there is a resource in our will. We need the help of the Holy Spirit to initiate all this. But as I often say, God does nothing in us without us.
Yeah.
We have to at least say the yes to these things.
Bob, I'm struck by just what to me felt just very profound what you just said there, that if I can try and paraphrase, because I'm not going to quote you exactly, because we tend to focus on the mistakes, and we see the mistakes as the problem in our life with God. Like I know as a pastor, that's a common thing. Oh, if you knew what I'd done, and of course the constant response in that, to me, I always say that I think we have a bigger problem with sin than God does, because God has dealt with it, but we seem to want to fixate on these, I'm not perfect. But I think what you said there was so profound. It's not actually the little mistakes that get us in the trouble. It's when we willfully decide, I'm going to do something other, right? And not in trouble with God, actually in trouble with ourselves. Right? Yeah. Like here's God saying, there's the road, like just go walk in it. That's all you need to do. And we're like, no, I have a better idea.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I love the language of invitation, which got introduced to me in my spiritual direction studies, and the people that I were around would talk about inviting God. What is God inviting you toward? And I just found that such a beautiful word. And I guess we could say that to whoever's listening now. What is that sense of invitation that God is saying, instead of that sort of that hard edge that we put on God, to say, what is he inviting me? He's inviting me into to look at a decision that I can make here. Choose a better way, walk it. And there really is the wisdom that comes from God to say, this is a way of peace and a way of blessing. And so all I have to do is cooperate with that, say yes to it, agree with the beauty of that way, and not try to, figure it out on my own, in my own power, my own will. Yeah.
And so with all of that in mind, Bob, Sunday is coming around again. You're going to be back with us. Do we have any recommended reading or homework? Or I'm being sarcastic. More, I mean, anything you want to turn our hearts towards, and say, hey, I'm going to be talking on Sunday. Why don't you think about this, or why don't you expect that, or perhaps you want to keep it a secret?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be writing the next couple of days, actually, but I do have a sense of where I'm going, because I want to create an arc here that will lead us toward that word discernment for the third Sunday. I'm really going to talk about the power of language here, and the power of conversation, and being able to name things, and so the issue always when we're battling sort of an internal battle is the ability to name what that is one of the biggest things. What is the struggle here? What am I looking for? What am I wanting? What am I hoping for? The ability to name that, and that's the ability to use words. It's words that bring us out into light. And so this is the pathway again with Jeremiah there. Stand, look, we have to pay attention first of all, but then we start to talk, right? We ask, we start to talk. That's the essence of prayer. We get into this conversation with God. But I do think it extends, not only does God just simply want to have this one-on-one with us, he wants us in a conversing community where we're sharing with each other, talking together. Yeah. So I do think, I don't know if I'll allude to it on Sunday, but that Emmaus Road story, which is much taught,
amazing,
but it's so amazing, is that our conversation of it, by ourselves is limited and probably takes us in the wrong direction. But when Jesus enters that conversation, it transforms. Yeah. So I do think the answer for us is to be in a conversing community. And I know that you're leading that way, David, and I think that's right. I think that's a right orientation. Then it's the question of how do we do this in a way that's life-giving. So I hope to go there on Sunday.
Well, Bob, thanks for spending some time with us today. Yeah. And I think I'm going to again speak for everybody and say I'm really looking forward to having you back with us on Sunday and hearing what you unpack for us.
Thank you so much, David.